My wife looked me in the eyes and said, "To me, you're just a wallet." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't hesitate. And somehow, that made it worse. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I just nodded like I understood something I wasn't ready to accept. Because in that moment, I realized this wasn't anger. This was honesty. And honesty, when it arrives too late, feels like betrayal. We were sitting in our kitchen in Greenwich, Connecticut, the kind of place people assume holds stable marriages and quiet success. Our neighbors knew me as Carter Whitfield, investment strategist, reliable, disciplined. They knew my wife as Sloane Whitfield, elegant, social, effortlessly charming. No one knew how little space there was between us anymore. The conversation started small. It always did. She wanted to upgrade her car. Again, the last one was barely 2 years old. A custom Porsche Macan. This time, she wanted something more aligned with her image. I asked what that meant. She smiled in a way that wasn't warm, in a way that measured me. It means I don't want to look like I'm stuck. Stuck. That word stayed in the air longer than it should have. I asked her what she meant by that. She leaned back in her chair like she had already decided how this conversation would end. "It means," she said calmly, "that I didn't picture this version of my life." I let that sit, because I wasn't sure if I was supposed to defend my career, my income, or myself. "I provide everything you asked for," I said, and I meant it. The house, the memberships, the vacations. Everything we had built together was funded by choices I made. But she didn't argue that. She didn't need to. She just said the one thing that reframed everything. "To me, you're just a wallet. No anger, no guilt, just clarity." And something inside me shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, quietly, permanently. I didn't react the way she expected. There was no confrontation, no raised voice. I just nodded. "Okay," I said, and I stood up and left the room. That was the last moment she thought she had control of the situation. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because I was angry, but because I was thinking about patterns, about habits, about everything I had been ignoring because it was easier to maintain peace than to face reality. Every purchase she made, every time she dismissed me in public, every subtle shift from partnership to entitlement. It wasn't sudden. It had been building for years. And I had allowed it, not because I was weak, but because I believed stability meant sacrifice. But there's a difference between sacrifice and erasure. And I had crossed that line without realizing it. The next morning, I woke up before her. I made coffee, sat at the same kitchen table where she had set it, and I opened my laptop. There were 7 credit cards connected to our accounts. 4 in her name, 3 shared. I didn't rush. I reviewed everything. Statements, spending patterns, balances, not out of anger, out of clarity. Because once someone tells you exactly how they see you, the only question left is whether you believe them. And I did. So I made a decision that didn't feel emotional. It felt logical. One by one, I shut them off. Not canceled, restricted. No access, no new charges. Everything still existed, but nothing moved. Then I transferred the remaining liquid funds into a separate account under my name. Not hidden, not illegal, documented, structured, prepared, because I knew what came next wouldn't be about feelings. It would be about consequences. 3 days passed before she noticed. 3 days. That surprised me more than anything. It told me exactly how disconnected we had become. She walked into the living room, holding her phone. Her expression wasn't confused. It was annoyed. "My card isn't working," she said. I looked up from my laptop calmly. "Which one?" She rolled her eyes. "All of them." I nodded slowly. "Yeah, that was it. No explanation. No apology. Just acknowledgement." And for the first time in a long time, she didn't have control of the conversation. "What do you mean, yeah?" Her tone sharpened. Not because she was hurt, because she was inconvenienced. "I mean, they're turned off," I said. Silence. The kind that doesn't process immediately. The kind that waits for a correction. But there wasn't one. "Why?" she asked. And that question mattered. Not because of the answer, but because of what it revealed. She didn't ask how I felt. She didn't ask what changed. She asked why the access stopped. Before I answer that, I want to ask you something. If someone told you that your only value to them was what you could provide financially, would you try to fix the relationship? Or would you start protecting yourself? I didn't answer her immediately, Because I wanted her to sit in the question she had avoided for years. Because you were right, I said finally. She frowned. What? You said I'm just a wallet. I met her eyes. So I stopped being one. That was the moment everything changed. Not dramatically, but irreversibly. She laughed at first. Not because it was funny, because she thought I was bluffing. Carter, stop, she said. I'm serious. So am I. Her smile faded. You can't just cut me off. I tilted my head slightly. Legally, I can restrict access to accounts I manage. Her posture shifted. The confidence wasn't gone, but it wasn't steady anymore. This is insane. No, I said calmly. This is adjustment. Each question revealed the same thing. Dependence without awareness. And for the first time, I didn't rush to solve it. I just answered honestly. You'll need to figure that out. That wasn't cruelty. That was reality. A week later, she scheduled a meeting with a lawyer. Not for divorce. For clarity. Because she needed to understand where she stood. And so did I. The meeting was professional. Structured. Predictable. But what stood out wasn't the legal discussion. It was the tone. She wasn't angry. She was cautious. Because she realized something she hadn't before. Control isn't permanent. It's conditional. And conditions change. Over the next month, everything shifted slowly. Not back to what it was, but into something neither of us had planned. We started talking differently. Not more, but more honestly. Not because we wanted to fix things, but because we couldn't pretend anymore. And that honesty came with a cost. Because once illusions disappear, you don't get them back. By the end of that month, we made a decision. Not emotional, not reactive, structured. We separated. No drama, no spectacle. Just two people acknowledging what had already ended long before the paperwork began. And strangely, there was no anger left, just clarity. Because sometimes the most painful part of a relationship isn't how it ends. It's realizing when it actually ended, long before you noticed. Personal reflection. What happened between Carter and Sloan wasn't sudden, even though it felt like it in that one moment. The truth is, relationships rarely break in a single sentence. They erode slowly through patterns that go unchallenged for too long. Sloan's statement, while harsh, was likely the result of a dynamic that had been unintentionally reinforced over time. Carter provided, Sloan adapted to that structure, and eventually, both of them stopped questioning the imbalance. From her perspective, the relationship may have gradually shifted into a transactional model without her consciously deciding it. From his perspective, providing became a substitute for emotional engagement, until it turned into silent resentment. Neither of them corrected the course early. And when truth finally surfaced, it came out in its rawest, most damaging form. Carter's response wasn't revenge, it was a boundary. A delayed one. And that delay is important. Because boundaries are most effective when they're set early, not when they're used as a final measure. At the same time, Sloan's reaction highlights something equally human. Dependence that goes unexamined until it's disrupted. She wasn't prepared for the consequences because she never believed the structure of her life could change. In the end, neither person was entirely right or entirely wrong. They were two people who stopped checking the foundation of their relationship until it was already compromised. And once that foundation cracks, rebuilding isn't always the outcome. Sometimes clarity is.